Yeah, hello again. If you've been following Rain World on YouTube, you've probably seen these three videos recommended to you at some point. As the creator of these videos are stupid, outdated, and bad. I'm allowed to say that. So I'm remastering them, starting with this one. A short summary of Rain World lore was the first video that really blew up on my channel, and I think I can do better. It's full of just dead-ass mistakes, a lot of mic quality problems, and it hasn't aged particularly well. So I'm remaking it with the new information I've learned in the year and a half since I made that video, and also the new information brought to us in Downpour. Trust me, there's a hefty chunk of new information given to us in Downpour. Oh yeah, also, this video serves as a really nice milestone for me, because I have just recently reached 20k subscribers. I didn't really think I'd reach this milestone ever, but thank you all to the long-term viewers for allowing me to even get here in the first place. I have a lot more content on this new expansion coming out soon, so click that red button if you'd like to see what that entails. Thank you all for watching, and wait, before we get started, I have a warning. A spoiler warning. I will not be holding back on spoilers. Downpour is relatively new, and the lore reveals are hefty and giant, so keep that in mind if you want to watch further. Anyways, let's go on and get started by talking about the world of Rain World is one trapped within a cycle, where all things are constantly brought back after death. For example, if a lizard got fucking murked by a vulture, it would wake up again in the same place that it started, alive once more. This happened ad nauseum, and there was seemingly no way to get out of it. Like sleep, like death, you wake up again. Each individual has its own cycle, basically its own storyline, which is described like a ring. It starts, and then it goes around, it ends, and then it starts again, ad nauseum. But if it were that simple and everything was just trapped in a time loop, this video wouldn't be as long as it is. A cycle is used as a form of time measurement, similar to days or weeks, though we don't actually know how long a cycle is. I have a theory, however, and it all hinges on the word hibernation. When a slug cat plays through a singular cycle, it is usually only a few minutes in length before the rain comes again. This is not the full cycle. Most of the cycle takes place while the rains are falling. If the rains only fell for a day, it wouldn't be called hibernation. So it's my theory that a cycle is closer to a week or even a month in length, with exceedingly lengthy periods of rainfall in between each couple minutes of not rainfall. But that's a bit off topic and it's small potatoes compared to the really interesting part of this game's world, that which lies beneath the rock. The farther you dig, instead of lava like you find here, in Rain World when you dig deep enough you find the void. A gargantuan, presumably infinite sea of heavily corrosive fluid. Not strictly acid, more of a supernatural type of corrosion. We'll get into it later. This sea was apparently the end-all be-all of existence, theorized to be eating the world from the bottom up as the world itself built upwards to escape its fate. This is unconfirmed. It could just be mythology or an origin story created later on with no basis in fact, but it's also not really all that important either way, as it's on such a huge timescale that even from the start to the end of the playable timeline, barely any notable difference in the landscape is seen beyond what could just be expected by shit moving and turning into dust. At this point in the timeline, there was no rain. Or well, there was still rain, but not that rain. There was nothing here but presumably a shitload of immortal animals consistently killing and eating each other, only to have them be reformed for the next couple cycles to be eaten later or live that cycle. How evolution even occurred then is kind of curious, but hey, we can see it happen. It's stated to exist later on as the creatures seen in game explicitly evolved from something else. The nature of life and death and cycles, and even the lineage system as it pertains to wild animals besides slugcat, is kind of curious. Does it even exist, or does it matter at all? Are the lizards and centipedes exempt from the cycle? Do they just, actually die? We don't really know. It is entirely possible that only the slugcats and other semi-sentient/intelligent beings are affected by the cycle. We could intuit that that's how it works, but what about the scavengers? I mean, it's hard to tell because we do only have theories. There's no concrete statement, besides the fact that we know that the slugcats, which are definably animals, if you aren't aware, are affected by the cycles. Anyway, let's move on. One way or another, a type of intelligent creature came into being from evolution, and we'll call them The Ancients were a race of tall humanoid entities that presumably developed in a very similar way to us throughout the ages, until they got to the interesting part of the story. The Ancients had a bit of a problem. Being intelligent and therefore affected by the cycle, if we're using that logic, they were completely and totally incapable of escape from that cycle, and thus, they idealized this escape as a form of transcendence, or ascension over the lowly plane that traps them so. This sounds suspiciously like a shitload of religious jargon, right? Well, dear viewer, you are correct. The Ancients were heavily religious. Even in the big sci-fi parts, they were still super focused on faith and tradition, it seemed. We'll get into the real interesting sci-fi Buddhist monk shit later, but just keep in mind that even at the end of ancient society, they were still really focused on maintaining their traditions. However, early on, the main schools of thought that pervaded ancient society were those of the 5 natural urges, tied to the 5 karma symbols, in order: violence, procreation, materialism, gluttony, and self-preservation. These 5 urges were believed to be the things that tied a being to life and to the cycle, so they tried to abate these natural urges through a number of methods. Not only going no-fap, but also starving themselves and rejecting all materialism. This monkhood was deemed the only true way to ascend, and there are no recorded methods of this working at all, at least none that are stated in-game. Though calling all the ancients suicidal monks is kind of misleading. As a matter of fact, there were plenty of ancients who didn't want to die, and as a matter of fact sought to better their lot in life. These ancients would be the first to find the void. As it happens, the puddle of turbo acid was exactly what the death-starved ancients of the time were looking for, as its corrosive properties were so strong and so weird, it melted you so thoroughly that you didn't come back. It was, as far as they can tell, the method of guaranteed permanent ascension. So plenty of ancients just threw themselves in, so many that they even built a number of temples, to help it feel more official. But also, plenty more ancients sought to harvest this seemingly infinite well of acid for energy. This innovation founded the Void Fluid Revolution, an explosive period of technological growth. The void fluid would be first harvested by a large drill, and then would be placed into a mass rarefaction cell, a way of turning basic raw materials into energy using the corrosive power of void fluid. After a while, a more efficient way of refining void fluid came into being, a filtration system that phased out the drills and made obtaining purified void fluid quick and easy. The Void Fluid Revolution saw a rise of many technological advancements, the primary one being purposed organisms, who are presumably coming after the Void Fluid Revolution. There's no real dating, but, I guess that makes sense. Here's a good example to define what a purposed organism was. Whereas you and I would probably invent a machine to shuck our corn for us, the ancients elected to toss that corn into a really weird animal that they genetically made that eats unshucked corn and poops out shucked corn. Purposed organisms were used for everything from spectacle to industry to computing. The ancients were able to configure organisms to refine metals, store memories, act as living electrical conduits, and so much more. These organisms weren't just the ones we could imagine. They were able to purpose microbes to melt down scrap into raw materials, as well as fortify those materials into exceedingly powerful versions of themselves. They were even able to make self-repairing buildings using these microbes. These purposed organisms became so common that they completely phased out non-purposed organisms. Almost all Rainworld creatures are likely evolved from purposed organisms in some way or another. As ascension became a more achievable goal, you had all kinds of people hopping in. As it turns out, the ancients were right about a few things. Not that they could ascend themselves using pure power of nofap, but that if one were too attached to their previous life, be it for altruistic reasons like loving the landscape, or egotistical reasons like being so far up your own ass you're coughing up your own head hair, you wouldn't be fully allowed to ascend. You'd be stopped at the metaphorical border patrol of the void, and a part of you would be able to ascend, but the rest of you, your consciousness, for lack of a better term, who you are inside your own head, would be left behind, trapped in the world you sought to abandon forever. An echo of your former self. These echoes were the nightmare of the ancients. To think that there was a possibility that ascending by void fluid could lead to something this horrifying. A permanent, agonizing entrapment, both within the bounds of the cycle and outside of it. This, understandably, caused a resurgence in the old schools of thought, with a ton more ancients starving themselves and refusing to jerk their weens in hopes of negating the chance of being left behind as a space squid. The potential of this horrific fate scared the ancients so bad that they sought to find a way to ascend either completely safely or without void fluid entirely. They named this predicament the Great Problem, or the Big Task, or a million other things. It's pretty hard to nail down a single way of saying it. I think all of them technically work. Anyways, the ancients had a plan to help figure out the solution to their Great Problem, which is what I'm going to be calling it because it sounds the best. Hey there, my fellow ancients. I decided not to take the long bath after seeing them in my nightmares one too many times and have a new product to sell you. Have you heard the horror stories of ancients being left behind in a state undefinable by God and nature alike? Have you been looking for a way out that doesn't require that nasty old golden puddle? Well, good news, it's not your problem anymore. We have spent an obscene amount of time and money to build ourselves a really large calculator, and here he is.
What?
Go on.
What do you...
Say something.
Okay. Watch Iterator log.
Okay, that's enough out of you, buddy. This guy here is an iterator, or iterator, if you're lame and want to pronounce it correctly. A giant purposed organism made out of metal and flesh that is designed specifically to run multiple parallel processes to determine the solution that we all desire. I also gave him depression, but he doesn't know it yet.
Wait, you gave me what?
So, valued potential customer, come on down and put your faith into the Iterator program. There is absolutely no way that this program has any side effects besides helping us all ascend 100% safely. Take it from me, 18 bowls of dicks, shining semen. Good night, everybody. Anyway, yeah, the ancients made Iterators, huge biological supercomputers designed to solve any problem the ancients could possibly have in a matter of cycles. But it didn't take just a few cycles. The problem, the great one, proved so unsolvable that they made presumably hundreds of iterators. But this led to the problem of coolant. Iterators needed a huge amount of water to work properly, and thus they pumped out a huge amount of water vapor. This led to a cloud problem and eventually a rain problem, turning world into rain world. Wow, I'm hilarious. With every new iterator only making the rains heavier and the surface more uninhabitable. Thus, they had an idea. Why even use the surface? There's plenty of space up here on top of our county-sized calculators with thoughts and feelings. But before we go, we should probably ensure that the surface is still livable, preserving wildlife and all that. So the ancients created a large array of shelters, watertight self-repairing structures to help maintenance workers and creatures alike survive the catastrophic rains. So now we have a bunch of stuck-up losers debating each other for all time on top of a bunch of confused, basically deities that have to care for them. Or well, it was that way for a while, but as it happens, the problem outlived the ancients, and one day, they had a global ascension and just kinda all left. They took a bath and said goodbye to the mortal coil. So now we have a bunch of essentially godlike teenagers without any idea on how to deal with a lack of purpose in their lives, and usually just as bad social skills. Also, they're all connected to each other through a global communication network. That's right, if you had immortal super-intelligent Discord furries with a fondness for the tilde key on your bingo card, congratulations, you have a problem. I'm not comparing their communication networks to Discord lightly, by the way. They have anonymous chat rooms based around certain topics, non-anonymous local chat rooms, DMs, moderators, hell, even trolls are canonized via the multiple transmissions and pearls that log the conversations of these supercomputer gods. All of the new ones in Downpour just make the comparison ring truer. So, what wonderful plot threads do you expect to emerge from this incredible premise of hundreds of deity-level robots stuck for an eternity, or at least until they all break down, with nothing to do but spin their wheels? Well, what do you mean nothing happens? So after an obscene amount of time, bordering on the thousands of cycles, one would presume, something interesting finally fucking happens. And by using the magic I'll explain it later procedure, an iterator called Sliver of Straw sends out a triple affirmative. Affirmative that a solution has been found, affirmative that the solution is portable, and affirmative that a technical implementation is possible and generally applicable. The triple affirmative was at this point the Bigfoot these folks were looking for, the proof that their purpose in life had been fulfilled. But then Sliver did a little bit of trolling and proceeded to die. To clarify, iterators are more or less able to die by their equipment degrading to the extent that they are incapable of retaining consciousness. This is likely because they are not in the cycle, the same way traditional creatures are. It could also be that because of their existence and the nature of it, that they don't ever really die. They're just reduced in mass and brain power until they're nothing more than just webs of neural tissue transmitting the most basic of signals, to where they're barely even conscious. And presumably even past that, they don't even count as dead. Because, the complex, all the organisms working together, has broken down, but the organisms still, to a very loose extent, exist. We've seen Iterators go through some really horrible stuff and live, so I'm tempted to take that side and just kind of say that because of the nature of Iterators, dying is kind of hard, because no matter how much damage you really do to them, to some extent, a point of their consciousness still exists. It's pretty horrifying when you think about it, but that's Rain World. Either way, despite all the evidence saying that it should be incredibly hard to kill an Iterator, Sliver died. Nobody knew how Sliver died. The triple affirmative was now an even bigger golden goose than before. Even worse, Sliver's death drew a big-ass rift in Iterator philosophy, splitting a large portion of them between Sliverist ideals and anti-Sliverist ideals. Sliverists looked into the triple affirmative and mused on the methods of which it could have been achieved, while anti-Sliverists did the opposite, vehemently going against Sliver's actions and stopping all pursuit of what could have happened to her. This is primarily because of an aspect of Iterator construction, the self-destruction taboo. In ancient society, a taboo is much more important than in our society, basically being a law. If something is taboo, it's more or less illegal. This is because of the whole thing about them valuing traditions a huge amount. Anyways, the self-destruction taboo is a code written into every single cell of an Iterator's body that prevents them from altering their own genome directly, as that would allow them to self-terminate. Considering that Sliver succeeded in that, any discussion of her would prove to challenge the idea of the self-destruction taboo. Now, this wasn't a bad position to take, because as we're about to discuss, topics of self-destruction were more than a little common in Sliverist spaces. Ooh, wow, yeah, took us even longer to get through it this time. That's what good lore tastes like. Joke's on you, though, we still have a little bit more to talk about before the playable events of the game. This is more just when the actual part of the world we see in the game starts to matter in the grand scheme of things. So to set the stage, Rain World, the game, takes place on the facility grounds of 5 Pebbles and looks to the moon. 2 Iterators built unusually close to one another, close enough that a sky bridge was built between the two to connect them. The facility grounds are full of old, broken structures, kept intact by a strong metal foundation that prevents the rains from pulverizing the ground into soft mud like it did with the rest of the world outside the retaining wall, which is a fortified circular wall that surrounds the entire facility grounds and keeps most creatures out, while keeping many others that are supposed to be there, and a few others that aren't, in. 5 Pebbles is quite the young Iterator, and was built to alleviate the problems that Moon was undergoing by having too many responsibilities to handle. The difference in their city structures shows how 5 Pebbles was the more popular spot to live at the very least. However, 5 Pebbles was quite the revolutionary, comparatively at least. As it happens, while Moon and her entire local group were doting on him, he and his good friend, 7 Red Suns, were talking about the less favorable topics among Iterator groups, such as, why are we even doing this? Is it truly wrong to attempt to break the self-destruction taboo? And, do I look good in this Catboy outfit? Ignore that last one. Anyways, 7 Red Suns, accidentally or otherwise, sent their friend down quite the pipeline, and 5 Pebbles ended up joining a few anonymous Sliverist groups under the name Erratic Pulse. His group tried to intervene, but he was already deep into the process of killing Moon via dehydration. See, the main way found to hypothetically break the self-destruction taboo was to create an organism that would do it for you. The problem is that in order to successfully create this organism, it would take an obscene amount of time, or would require a shitload of water. So 5 Pebbles, in his emo phase, was attempting to do this by chugging all the water in the nearby area, therefore dehydrating Looks to the Moon. However, in her death throes, Moon used her seniority privilege, a way for older Iterators to exert authority over younger ones, to yell at 5 Pebbles through his thorough ghosting of her. This Discord ping caused 5 Pebbles to fumble his experiments, which accidentally unleashes the Rot onto his superstructure. For context, the Rot is presumably a title for any type of cancerous organism that consumes an Iterator. When I say cancer, I mean it. They are described as cysts and grow in a very similar way. So Five Pebbles is now really angry at Moon for her perceived slight against him, and proceeds to use the rest of the water that she needs to fight off his robot cancer. This is where the timeline comes in. Behold, our first Slugcat, Spearmaster. Spearmaster is a messenger made by Seven Red Suns to give a pearl to Five Pebbles. The events of the campaign are the second time they've been sent over to Five Pebbles. Over the events of the campaign, Spearmaster travels up to him, gets the pearl ripped out of his chest. Then Five Pebbles essentially cuts Seven Red Suns out of his life by brain blasting his Overseer. Overseers are essentially mobile, sentient cameras that are under the Iterator's control, and they have different colors for each one. This one is Moon's, this one is Pebbles, this is No Significant Harassments, we'll get to him later, and this is Seven Red Suns. Either way, after doing all that, he throws Spearmaster out, and then Spearmaster has to go to Moon. Moon's facility is mid-collapse, and Spearmaster does one last favor for her, taking the rewritten pearl that was once in the hole in his chest to communications arrays, which contains Moon's last message to the local group. The Spearmaster then returns to Seven Red Zones and presumably lives out a great life as a house cat, and we move on to our next Slugcat, Artificer. Artificer doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. She was a Slugcat whose kids were murked by scavengers, and now she wants revenge. She takes that revenge by going on a Doomslayer rampage, wiping out all the scavengers that live in Five Pebbles City. However, if you instead choose to ascend, which you cannot fully do because Artificer is locked at the violence karma for obvious reasons, you are treated to a new Ascension cutscene, which I'll talk about when I get to the weirdness of the Ascension endings later. Moon's state has deteriorated in Artificer to an extent where she is mostly collapsed, and after this campaign, she collapses fully off-screen into the ocean. Next up, the Hunter. Hunter is a messenger sent by No Significant Harassment, another one of the local group of Iterators, with a payload designed to bring Moon back from her collapsed slumber. Well, less of a slumber, more of a coma. This succeeds, but also No Significant Harassment may or may not have given it turbo cancer. Hunter will die in just under 20 cycles, so hopefully he ascends before then, or he turns into this. Yeah, as it happens, Hunter's cancer doesn't just kill him, because he's a part of the cycle. He can't die. No, he turns into something else. His body is literally hijacked by his cancer, or should I say, his rot. Hunter's corpse, found in the campaign of our next Slugcat, moves exactly like mobile rot cysts do. Crazy, eh? Anyways, Gourmand time. Gourmand was the first Slugcat to cause Five Pebbles to unlock the retaining wall, allowing creatures like him to leave his facility grounds instead of just being stuck there. It also confirms to us that Slugcats are from outside the facility grounds, which is apparently an infinite muddy swamp made of old building remnants. Cool. Gourmand's entire campaign is revealed to have been a scouting mission for the tribe's new home. Nice, he's got kids. Good dad. Next up are Survivor and Monk. Both came from the same event, Survivor being separated from his family and somehow washing halfway across the county into outskirts. His goal is to find his family again. The Monk is his brother who's searching for him. Not much occurs, but if you go to the Slugcat's home tree, they see that the entire tribe has migrated away, presumably after finding suitable lands to inhabit after the Gourmand scouting mission was a failure. Neither of them really achieve anything in their campaigns, however they do give me time to mention that Five Pebbles' plans to stop the rot from spreading have notably failed. Now he's just waiting for it to eat him. Our next campaign is Rivulet, and guess what? The rot's eaten him. Five Pebbles is so thoroughly consumed by the rot that the area name has changed entirely. Despite this, his facility still has power, and at least some remaining processes in it. Also, the rot is kind of mimicking Iterator functionality and is pumping out an insane amount of rain because of it, kind of just overusing the power that he has still. When Rivulet crawls through the cancer-infested tunnels of Five Pebbles' superstructure, he tells the Wet Mouse to do a favor for him. He wants Rivulet to take his last emergency power cell to Moon so she can at least be functional for the remainder of time. He does this as a sort of attempt at redemption. Rivulet then swims down, puts the thing in place in Moon's superstructure, bringing her back to functionality. She regains control of her facility, her overseers, and her communication arrays, allowing her to talk with her local group and Five Pebbles once more. She then thanks the cat which has restored her godhood and names it Ruffles, wholesome, and sends both Five Pebbles and her local group a message stating that she is alive. She then canonically plays board games with Five Pebbles for essentially the rest of time. Alright, that's all the weirdos talked about. You may notice one was missing. We'll get to him. By God, we'll get to him. But right now it's time to talk about... Alright, now let's talk about what happens when one of the Slugcats ascends. First off, the slug cat moves through the old filtration systems and into the depths, before slamming its face into the void sea and swimming downwards. Now, this is where these fuckers come in. The void worms. I didn't even try to contextualize these guys in my short summary video because, by God, there is nothing in the game to even come close to telling us anything about them. We just gotta intuit it by our encounters. We'll talk about them more later, trust me. There's a lot of them, like a potentially literally infinite amount of them. They seem to be, for the most part, minding their own business, except for this one. We've named him Jerry. Jerry's my friend. Jerry's a gentleman. I will not take any Jerry slander. Anyway, Jerry swims down, looks at exactly 75% of the slug cats, and then pulls them down into what we can only presume is proper ascension, where they swim towards the light in an odd metaphor before seeing a proper cutscene. The actual cutscenes themselves all start with another visualization of all the slug cats swimming. Then they either A, look at the camera all cute like Spearmaster Gourmand and Rivulet, and then the cutscene ends, or they have a custom event occur after that. For Survivor, he sees that all of his family are there too. For Monk, he finds Survivor, and for Hunter, his disease leaves him and he returns to the arms of his creator. For Artificer, she fails to ascend after Jerry leaves her crying in the dirt, and ends up finding her children again before being separated from them yet again. Damn, sucks to suck. We'll break down all this later. We're just prepping the information for the final section. Now it's time to talk about that fuzzy green elephant in the room. This froggy man is so fucking insane with what he adds to the lore that he gets his own section. So, the Saints campaign starts late, like end of the timeline late. Like the entire world was plunged into an ice age in the meantime, and Five Pebbles' entire structure collapsed down on Shaded Citadel. Saints campaign starts with an odd sight, him in the Void Sea, framed in the same way as most of the Ascension cutscenes, ending with him looking up at Karma 10. Throughout the entire Saint campaign, he is just walking around, talking with the Iterators, and gaining all the echoes he needs. All of which have new dialogue. I really gotta make a video on the echoes soon, if only for my desire to dramatically read out their dialogue. I'll maybe do it next. Tell me if y'all want that. Anyways, Saint doesn't discover much until he gets to Karma 10. That's when things get really funky. I think at this point I should just tell you what Saint probably is. Don't trust me specifically, because getting a handhold on Saint's lore is like trying to throttle an octopus in a lake of oil. But we discover at the end of the challenge mode that Saint is very likely the triple affirmative. He's got 3 dots on his head, was likely made by Sliver of Straw to ascend her, which he can do, by the way. I didn't mention it yet, but Saint activates God mode when he reaches 10 karma and gains the power of a kill button. You put it over some rowdy motherfucker and pop. They are ascended canonically. It is called performing an ascension. You can do this to Moon and Pebbles too. The reason why he's here so late is likely because he took his sweet time going to and ascending almost every single Iterator before getting to these two, which he can do, by the way. He can ascend Iterators. We see in the challenge mode that he ascended Sliver of Straw. Fucked up how the solution was just this guy. Now we can kind of assume that Saint has already ascended most of the other Iterators because we see a shot that showcases that most of the Iterator facilities in the distance have collapsed. So unless we got a million crippled robots sitting in their own slag heap, there's a good chance Saint's been pretty busy. Saint's purpose was likely to be the solution, to be the thing that ascends all of them. So he walks in over the retaining wall with a will and a way to send both Moon and Pebbles past the Golden Sea and into the Void with only his mind powers. But what if Saint wants to go to the Void as well? As it happens, Saint is a special existence, and also because it's highly likely that that thing about the Void slowly eating the world from the bottom up was kind of true, because the depths are just gone. I don't know where they went, but they're just kind of gone. If Saint hops down into the space where there used to be the depths, he enters Rubicon. A not very well thought out area gameplay-wise, and a very weird area lore-wise. By definition, a Rubicon is a dividing line. Just the region name alone tells us that this is the limit between the Void Sea and the proper world above. Or well, that's not told to us, it's presumed. Here, there are all the worst creatures. Red lizards, centipedes, Miros vultures, daddy longlegs, spitter spiders. buddy, I think you're a bit outclassed. You should probably get home. Oh yeah, and Guardians. You can ascend Guardians. It takes a few hits, but you can kill them. More fuel for Fauna Remastered, that's how I see it. Anyways, after fighting through the lower half of Rubicon, you get to the upper half, which appears to be an odd recreation of the world, filled with rooms you've already seen before. Ascending to the top of Rubicon, you swim through a zero-gravity recreation of an Iterator's General Systems bus, while a reversed sundown motif plays in the background the whole time. Eventually, you reach an odd puppet chamber. If the Saint leaves through this area, it finds itself swimming upwards through the Void Sea, past a woven mesh of drills pointing upwards. Before another Void Worm finds it, this is Ereg. He's not like Jerry. Jerry's a gentleman. Ereg is a bastard. Saint decides to put him in his place with a little bit of a brain blast, and Ereg responds by turning on his mixtape and running away, playing Pulse the whole time. He's got good taste, I'll give him that. While Pulse plays and massages my eardrums, the Saint finds itself sprouting tendrils and glowing like an echo as pieces fall off of it. It then wakes back up in the place where the campaign started. A Slugcat dream appears next to it, and the echo aura that was covering it is now dispelled, ending the campaign, and showing on the final art that the Saint is now, or perhaps always was, an echo. Alright, so what the fuck? Well, I have played you by being a good storyteller, for I have withheld information on purpose. How diabolical I am. The true form of evil. As it happens, this puppet chamber that we went through can have moon, pebbles, or both, depending on whether or not you ascend them. And they've got some pretty fucked up and huge dialogue that I'm going to put on screen right here because I am not reading all of that. The main thing that all this dialogue says is that Saint is trapped in an endless cycle. 5 Pebbles can see his own cycle in its entirety, from his creation to his existence as a shelter from the storm in Saint's timeline. But the Saint's cycle is never ending, an unstoppable loop that spirals into infinity. Both of them tell him that it's time to wake up from this dream that apparently is Rubicon. It's likely that Rubicon was even formed because of Saint's nature. A thing that can never ascend brought into the Void Sea causes it to freak out and build this weird extra area from the pieces of the world above. The area is filled with so much annoying and super hard bullshit because the Void is actively trying to get Saint out of Rubicon. It doesn't want it there. Perhaps that's why the Void Fluid itself acts as a hazard, violently rejecting the Saint where it would happily embrace the other Slugcats in their campaigns, even Artificer. The Saint cannot end its own cycle. It is an echo by definition, completely incapable of ascension. Its existence is bound to ascend everything else but itself, to be the solution for all things. A true martyrdom, fit for a saint. So, what else do we have to discuss now? I think that's it. The end of the timeline has Saint traveling the world, ascending everything with his fucked up mind powers. Cool. Another civilization will come to be in the ruins of the ancients, and the cycle will restart. So I think that's all I have to say about the new stuff in Downpour, besides a few whack-ass theories about Ascension not really existing and dust and all that nonsense, which I guess I can talk about later, maybe, but I don't really have the time to talk about now because yeesh, look at that runtime. Can I still call this a short summary? Whatever, we'll see. Either way, thank you all for watching. Subscribe if you like this kind of content. I've got more Rain World stuff coming down the pipeline, including my biggest project literally ever, coming hopefully within the next week or so. Either way, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.